Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I don't want to talk about a specific book that I read, but rather because it is May 1st, in the beginning of the month, I want to do a wrap-up video and a TBR for both for April and what I plan to read in May. In terms of what I read last month, I think I didn't get to everything that I wanted to. Reading both Invisible Man as well as Beloved, it took a bit of time, just because Invisible Man I had started I think in March, and so it just spilled into April, and then Beloved, it was there. Toni Morrison's writing was really hard to get through, so it just took longer than normal to finish it. But fortunately, I was able to finish it and get to some of the other books that I wanted. But hopefully that doesn't happen this month. Although, based on one of the books that I have planned, I might not get to everything. Which is again, it's fine. It doesn't matter quantity so much as quality of books, I suppose. And I've been reading some pretty high quality books. So without further ado, let's talk about my wrap-up video and my TBR. So what did I read last month? In terms of books read, one thing that I read that I made an April 1st video for was The Very Hungry Caterpillar, which is the greatest book ever written, in my opinion. But you could also argue that objectively, it is the greatest book ever written, and that every other book that aspires to be great is merely, walking in the footsteps of The Very Hungry Caterpillar. Go check out my video that I made for that. I will put a link to it in the description. I also read Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. I thought it was very thought-provoking. I thought the writing was a little bit hard to get through just because Ellison, bounces back and forth between different ideas at a rapid pace. But I still thought the story was brilliant just because he presents a lot of microaggressions that happen to the main character, and if these were just one or two microaggressions that happened sparingly, that would still be a problem, but it'd be something you could address. But it's just one microaggression after another, slowly building to highlight this racist, oppressive system in which people of color live. And this book was written in the 1950s, but it's still, everything that Ralph Ellison said still holds true to this day. The political systems, the police, the workplaces, all of these institutions are still very racist and need to be addressed in order for there to be true equity in America. And we've only just begun to scratch the surface in terms of addressing these issues. I also made a bad book roundup for two books, Empire State and Pride of Baghdad. Both of them were graphic novels, and they were both pretty meh in my opinion. Pride of Baghdad was kind of forgettable and had a really dumb ending in my opinion. And Empire State had a lot of potential, but I don't think Jason Shiga ever fully connected the ideas he was playing with. And so it just comes off as more hollow than anything else. So unfortunately, those were two graphic novels that really disappointed me. I also read, as I had previously mentioned, Beloved by Toni Morrison. I had mentioned when I made my review earlier this month that it felt kind of weird to me, especially with Toni Morrison's writing, how jarring it felt, how she shifted between the past and the present way too rapidly. Ralph Ellison, as I had mentioned, also did that, but I felt he was able to, his writing was able to overcome that issue. But Toni Morrison didn't really overcome those problems. But that said, her story was still fascinating, and I really liked the characters and her exploration of trauma as it relates to slavery and the fear of having your individual liberty taken away, and what that might cause a person to do. I definitely still recommend Toni Morrison's Beloved. I think it. Given enough time, I can still see why it's super important, and its themes and its message haven't left me. So I do think that that I'm better off for having read it, and I think I'm much more forgiving. And in time, I'll definitely forget the bad problems that I had with the book, and remember much more the great elements. So Toni Morrison, did a pretty good job. I would love to explore more of her work, just to see, if it's different from Beloved or similar to Beloved. Either way, I'm sure it would be similarly impactful. I also read We Had a Little Real Estate Problem by Cliff Nesteroff, which was a nonfiction book about the history of Native Americans and comedy and entertainment. I thought it was a pretty solid book to read. I loved how it showed a great deal of instances of Native Americans in comedy, both in the past and in the current moment, and also talking about how it helps with activism too. I read it for a book club, so I'm glad that book club is in my life. I definitely I recommend it to you out there if you're interested in learning more about this niche area of comedy. And I'm also glad that it taught me a lot about Native Americans in general, but also about Indigenous people trying to make their way into the world at the present moment. So a good experience, a good book to have read. I also read V for Vendetta by Alan Moore. It was pretty fun. I would have to say I didn't enjoy it as much as Alan Moore's other graphic novels. I thought that some of the ideas presented weren't as nailed down as you might have found in Watchmen and the Killing Joke. Still fun, but a lot more to be desired, and I hope I find more by Alan Moore that's similar to Watchmen rather than V for Vendetta. I also read Cairo by G. Willow Wilson. I thought it was a pretty decent story, but largely forgettable. Even a couple days later, I find myself having a hard time remembering what the story was exactly about. It had interesting art, but I think in the long run, I'm probably going to forget a decent amount about the story. It just the plot and the story elements weren't exactly memorable, which is I guess I can say I read it, but if you can't remember a story so quick after reading it, or if a story doesn't really stick in your mind, I think that is very telling about the longevity of the story in general. And then the last thing I read for this month was Under the Red Hood. It was the Batman comic by Judd Winick, as well as it had a bunch of art from various artists. It is tremendous. It is a wonderful graphic novel, one of my favorite Batman stories, and also I feel it redeems the Death in the Family storyline, which I thought suffered from being too jokey. Like Joker comes off as a dumb villain. Why do they give Joker the authority to kill that version of Robin? And then he pleads diplomatic immunity, and it just comes off as very bizarre. So I thought it was. I thought it was a bit uneven, and it isn't one of the best Batman stories. But Under the Red Hood, I feel sort of addresses the concerns that I had with that, and gives it a more serious tone, and I definitely enjoyed it. The Red Hood, or Red Robin, or whatever the Hood wants to call himself, is an interesting character added to the DC Pantheon, and I know a lot of people had a problem with bringing Jason Todd back to life, but they didn't do it all willy-nilly. They did it to really bring to add more layers to Batman and Bruce Wayne as characters, and that's a good justification. If you simply bring like a character back for shock value, I can see how you would have a problem with that. But this is like a rich character to add to the pantheon. So well deserved, well written in my opinion. I also read a number of short stories last month, including Huntsman by Anton Chekhov, which is pretty good, and I'm looking forward to examining more of his work in the future. At Night by Edgar Carrot, which I thought was pretty funny. History Lesson by Arthur C. Clarke, which I thought was a great example of sci-fi, even if its ending felt a bit like a troll on his part. Also Sweat by Zora Neale Hurston, probably the best short story that I read last month. Very similar to A Jury of Her Peers by Susan Glaspell, in that both short stories focus on the husband character dying, and in A Jury of Her Peers, the woman under investigation is we learned that she was kind of abused, and although the Delia, I think it is, although she did not murder her husband in this story, like she did let him die, and you can see the justification for not trying to save him at all, given that she was in an abusive relationship. And these stories really came out at similar points in time, where feminism was just was gaining ground, and so you have these stories presented where like, here's a reason why like women might harm their husbands if they're in an abusive relationship, and showing the conditions that lead to that. So a wonderful short story in my opinion, and definitely worth checking out. However, the one thing that I didn't like last month, because I had to catch up on books or because other events took precedent, is that I didn't read any poems, which is funny because Lucas over at the Bits of Lit, he put off poems for some time, and he seems to have done more than I did last month. So if you want to check out poems, go look at his channel, but I will try to get to them in May. And now we move on to the TBR, or the TBR. What books do I plan on reading next month? The first book that I want to get to after I finish reading the Nightfall storyline from the Batman comics, which is the first thing that I'm going to read. But one of the things I want to get through is Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. And I thought it was going to be a short read, but the book I got from the library is 1,000 pages long, so that it's going to take a while to get through that. If I even actually manage to get through it, because it's a really like wordy kind of book, and I've heard that it's a hard read sometimes. So who knows if this might actually be a DNF or not. But I'm going to try my best to get through it and try to understand why some people consider it to be one of the best pieces of modern literature, maybe after the year 2000. I also want to read On Stranger Tides, which is a book that I'm doing with as part of a booktube challenge with Lucas over at the Bits of Lit. It's a celebration of my 1 year anniversary being a booktuber, which I'm very proud about. Some weird pirate, Captain Bookman, he managed to hijack my channel and issued a channel to Lucas, so that's something that I'm going to have to do. But, I'm always willing to, I'll be seeing you very soon, Lucas, to do that challenge in order to in order to read more books and interact with Lucas, who has interesting ideas over at the Bits of Lit. I also want to read more comics. I've checked out a number from the local library. I want to get to the one of the final Princess Diaries books. I just want to be done with this series already, and I know that it's lingering out there. And I also want to read Good Talk, which I'm reading for the book club that I'm doing. So that's another another social justice oriented book that I hope to read for this coming month. In terms of short stories, I have a number that I want to get to. I'm going to read short stories by Salinger and Bradbury in this month. I have another one that I don't exactly have planned, but it's in the air. And then there's You Think It, I Say It, which I checked out from my local library. It's a short story collection, so we'll see if that's good or if that leaves a lot to be desired. But I'm always eager to read through the ones I get from the local library. And the last thing to note is I do have some poetry planned, as I mentioned before, so be on the lookout for that. And that appears to be all I want to talk about at this point in time. If you want to suggest something for me to read, or if you want to comment on something that I have planned, feel free to do so below. Let's have a discussion about this. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this delightful channel. And in the meantime, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and May travels. Farewell.